everyone, got this big box from Amazon today, and if you know what BenQ is, you know it's a new display. I reviewed the BenQ 27-inch display when I was working on for my friend Randy Collier a couple months ago, and I was surprised at for the money how good they were. You know, the thing that makes BenQ kind of cool is that they work on displays to help out specific industries, and so they have several that are designed specifically for photography. And as a photographer, what we're looking at is the ability to really color match and color manage so that we can get good prints. Now, I've got an NEC 301W and an NEC 302W. Had them for a long time. The 301W is like 10 years old. CFL backlit. Cooked my breakfast on the thing. It gets pretty hot. And I thought, you know, it's time I get rid of that and get something a little newer. And I was thinking I'd go about getting the 32-inch normal resolution BenQ. And I thought, you know, I think I'm going to try a 4K one. Now, at the time I made that video about the 27-inch, I felt that most photographers would be pretty happy without getting a 4K because it really looks about the same to your eye. You're not really going to res it up to the full 4K resolution. You're actually going to probably scale it down anyway. And when you go to 1:1, it's actually maybe a little harder to judge sharpness and stuff because 1:1 means it's smaller on the screen, right? But in my case, I'm going to keep the 302W, and I thought, you know, I'm going to get the 27-inch 4K one, and it's mainly so that I can do my video work, because then I can capture a true 16:9 4K feed. And so it's not, right now it's really fuzzy when I do it because it's at a display that's not native to it. And so it'll look sharper while I do the video, and then I'm thinking it'll give me the ability to actually zoom in and keep that a little sharper too. So that's why I bought this one. Now, the one thing that's cool about a BenQ is their price. This one is only like 1,100 bucks. And I think an equivalent NEC would be probably 2,200, 2,400, not sure. ISO's going to run that or even more. Now, I know unboxing videos are a little boring, but I don't get a chance to do them very often. So I'm going to try this one here. Now, what I'm guessing is going to happen is I'm going to unbox it. I'm not going to talk much while I do it. And I'm probably going to be, that way I can maybe in post speed it up. And so maybe I can like get this thing unboxed in like 10 or 15 seconds. So let's see if I can get this thing unboxed. This box is kind of a weird shape for a skinny display. It says individual calibration report, and there's nothing in it. Okay, I get it now. Here's the display itself. Oh, cool, look at that. No bezel, just display. Very cool. Ah, this is the hood. Now, when I ordered this on Amazon, it kind of, it had a place where I could order a hood for it. And I was surprised because I know the other one came with a hood. And so if you buy one of these BenQ monitors, the hood is part of it. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to use the hood because I really don't have any light hitting it. But, you know, I'll put it together and put it on there and see what I think. Another box, I assume this is the little control puck. I'm not sure what they give you a DVD for. So there's the, so this is a USB-C, USB-C display cable. And they give you all kinds of cables here. Here's the hotkey puck. And if you saw the other video, this is pretty cool because it lets you switch from two different profiles just by pushing a button. So cables, this looks like a power cable. I have a, oh, this is the USB cable because this also is a little USB hub. I'll show that when we kind of review it. And this looks like DisplayPort to DisplayPort cable. So quite a few cables. Okay, we've got it unboxed. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in place here, and then after I use it for about a week, I will decide how I think it compares to the $2,500 NEC 302W that I've got. I'm going to make some prints. I'm actually going to do some Lightroom work, some Photoshop work, make some prints, and I'll be back and let you know what I think. Cool. Okay, I've got my BenQ monitor set up. I've been using it a couple of weeks now. I've got it pretty much where I like it. I've done it mainly to use video, but I've worked with Lightroom in it and I made a few prints. So I thought what I would do now is talk about some of the reasons for 4K, go over how you calibrate it. I'm going to talk briefly about how I think you should calibrate it. It's going to be different than what BenQ recommends. Anyway, one of the advantages we have of a 4K monitor, and one of the reasons I wanted to buy it is, first of all, it's capable of multiple resolutions. And in this case, I've only got you can see on the screen here, I've only got the Palette Master software up, and it doesn't fill up very much of the screen. And so if I really want to, I can go up here and I use this little program called Easy Res. And I say, look, let's go ahead and make this bigger. Now you can't do that on a normal monitor. So I can, for example, go to this 2048 by 1152. And now it's a lot bigger, yet it's still sharp. And that's the advantage of a 4K monitor, is multiple resolutions are very usable, very doable, because most of them look quite sharp. You know, to my eyes, they all look pretty good. So now I've got a lot bigger screen to work with. So now we're ready to make a profile. The first thing I recommend is that you don't make a profile unless your display has been on for at least 30 minutes or so. I found that in the new LED backlit displays is not quite as critical, but it's still a good idea to at least let them warm up for a little while. It's also pretty critical that we use the advanced mode. In advanced mode, we enable several options that aren't available in the basic mode, and those options are critical in making sure we can get the maximum quality profile that the BenQ can offer. And I use a i1 display profiler device, and if you've hooked up the USB dock that's inside of your BenQ, then you can just plug this into the side of the display when it's time to run your profile. That was actually kind of a pain to put in there. The USB slots are quite a bit around the back side, instead of being kind of flush with the side, which would be kind of nice. I guess it's because they wanted to keep that thin. Anyway, we've got the sensor plugged in, and what we'll do is we'll click check sensor. And you can see the little green check mark means that it detected it. And as you can see, the light's flashing on my sensor. So now we can go ahead and start. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is make a profile for printing. Now, one thing that's important to understand about printing is what we're trying to do is set up a display to emulate and look like what a print would look like. Now, the key to that is to actually make the display look like a print. Not try to figure out why the print doesn't look like the display. So most of the people that are teaching it now are going to tell you that there's only two things you can modify in the whole process of setting up your display, and that is the display itself. You can change the white point, and you can change the brightness. I can't change the printer profile, and that wouldn't make any sense, because the profile is built based on the gamut capability of the output device. And so why would you try to modify what the printer can do? We just want to know every color that it can print. Same thing we want with the display. We want to know every color it can display, even if they're beyond Adobe RGB. So most of the time, a good print profile for your display, or a good emulation profile for your display, is not going to be 6500 or daylight or whatever, and it's not going to be bright, because even those things will affect how you change the file on your display, which will then change and affect how the print looks. So I have found that around 5500 to 5700K is a pretty good starting point for the white balance. But that again depends on the viewing condition of the print. If I put my print and I've got a really, I've got sunlight hitting it, that will change it. So it's sort of important you have a good viewing condition and you build that. And I've got a video about color management. It's another month out, and that'll go into that more in detail. But as far as brightness, about 120 is the setting you want to go for, because anything brighter will make you change the colors of your prints, or the density of your print, which will in turn make your print look dark. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the density, the brightness of the display, and the white point of the display until what our display shows us visually matches
what our print looks like when we look at it over in our print display area. Now, in my case, I've got a wall that's lit with special LED lights. I can hang it up there. The one thing you don't ever do is do this. You don't try to put them side by side because they'll never match perfect. So what you want to do is you want to look at it on the screen and then look over here. That split second of turning your head allows your brain to slightly recalibrate because you're never going to get an exact match. But the key is, does this print look like what I'm seeing? If so, then when I work on my next image, I can trust that what I'm seeing, I got to quit hitting the microphone. I can trust what I'm seeing here will look good when I make a print. Okay, I just about had this video out on YouTube and I thought, you know, I need to explain this part of the process a little bit more. So I used some time travel abilities, jumped back into the video so I could say how you're going to do the process. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because that's just going to take too much time. First of all, you want to download a good target file that's sort of an industry standard and make a print from that. I'm going to link 3 in the description below. Bill Atkinson, who kind of pioneered a lot of the techniques we use today in color management. Andrew Rodney, who is a color scientist and probably the leading expert on color management as far as photographers are concerned. And then Jack Flesher, who's just a really smart guy. And his is cool because he has steps at the bottom that lets you know if you're really getting the shadows and the detail highlights that you should. Doesn't matter which one of those you choose. I personally use Bill Atkinson's only because I've been using it since he came out with it a decade or two ago. But what you want to do is print it on your printer. Make sure you use the right profiles, the right printing technique. And when you're done, it should look great. It should look really good. There should be no banding. All the gradation should be smooth. Colors should be rich, but not oversaturated. And once you've got that, then you're ready to go. You want to put that in your viewing area, which is lit with correct light. I'm not going to get into detail, but it's important that you have a good, correct viewing area. You're going to put the file up on your display using your color software. It's either going to be Photoshop or Lightroom, whatever you printed from. And then you're going to look at your display and you're going to look at your print and you're going to decide if they match. If they don't match, what you do is you make a new profile and you modify the settings. As I said, there are 2 things you can change. You can change the white point, so you can make the overall display warmer or cooler, and you can change the density or the brightness by changing your luminance. If the display looks too cool compared to your print, then you need to go to a lower white point. If the display looks too warm, you go to a higher white point. Now, if you're using really daylight bulbs in your viewing area, it's a whole nother game. I do not recommend that. That's really not a good practice, because nobody lights their prints with daylight. And the thing that you'll find is if you print your prints for a lower Kelvin of light and they look good, they'll still look really good in daylight. There's not a problem there. And basically you're just going to make the profile and repeat the process till you feel you've got a good match. Now, I will say that you probably don't want to use matte papers to do this because that's a whole nother world and they're difficult. You're better to get your display dialed in with good color gloss papers such as Epson Luster, things like that. And then, or maybe you're using an outside lab and so you're going to use Fuji or Kodak printed paper. And if you don't have your own printer, you can just send this file to your lab and make them make you a print. That's actually a pretty good way to go. If you use an outside lab, let them print your test target so you can get a comparison. Because if your print that they print for you matches your display, then when you work on other prints, you're going to have a pretty good chance that they're going to match what you saw. So anyway, I wanted to make sure we understood that process because I'm going to use 6000K, and as you can see over the video I've overlaid, my display turned out a little cool. My display profile is a little cool. And I recommend 57 to around 55 to 5700, and I use 6000. And now you can see why in my case, I'm probably going to drop it to 58, 5700 and remake it. Anyway, let's jump back into the video and finish this thing up. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our profile. Let's go next. Now, the default profile, it says, is Adobe RGB up at the top. Now, understand, this is simply a preset. It's really all it is. When you change all of these settings, all it does is change all of these other settings down below. So if I go to Web Design sRGB, it changes sRGB. So what you want to do, it doesn't matter what this says because you can change it. What you really want is to change your Kelvin to a different number. And like I said, it looks like I must have used 6000 when I did it. But you want to change your RGB primaries to panel native. So what you're saying is, I want you to use every possible color that you can use when you make this profile. That's how you profile an output device. You don't artificially limit it to a working space, because that's all Adobe RGB is. It's just a working space. Okay. Typically, you're going to set the luminance to 120. That's a good starting point. Leave the gamma where it is and the black point to absolute 0. And then you're good to go. And then you hit next. This is telling me what calibration preset, and this relates to the numbers. And later, we're going to change number 1 to be this profile and number 2 to be our sRGB profile. I always use the large setting. This will sample the most number of colors. The more colors you sample, the higher the quality of the profile. The main difference is if you use a smaller number of colors, it just takes less time. But you only do this every few months, so what's a couple extra minutes? I recommend that you use a version 2 profile, because I've had people, version 4 profiles have been, especially in printing, have been known to be a problem, especially on the Mac. And version 2 profiles are quite safe. Now, when you click system level, that's telling you where it wants to save the profile. Now, system level, I don't think actually works. My friend tried it, he said it doesn't work. For some reason, both the i1 profiler, they don't seem to be able to access the system level color sync folder. And all it is they have to, go through some process of getting permission, and they don't bother doing that. So, but it's no big deal. If this will save in the user folder, and if you might have to move it if you've got multiple users on the computer. So now we just hit start measurement. It's going to give us all the instructions. So it says to turn the sensor like that. Then we hit continue. Now it tells us to hang the sensor. The best way to hang the sensor, hopefully you can still hear me. So hang it over the back with the weight, position it where the little picture is. I usually move the window over to the middle so that the sensor is positioned in the middle of the display. I always tilt the monitor as far as it'll go so gravity will keep it flat against the panel when I do the measurement. And then you hit continue. And it will take a little while, and when it's done, I'll be back. Okay, and so that's done. The one thing I didn't mention is the ICC profile name. This actually gives you all the information you really need. It tells you the white balance you use, it tells you the luminance, and it tells you the gamma, and it tells you the date that you made it on. It's a pretty good idea to remake these profiles every once in a while. Probably not as often as used to be. We said at least once a month. I think with modern LED backlit, it's more like 4 months or 5 months. But unless it's a really ultra color sensitive thing. Anyway, it tells you all of the other things. Now, it does have a process where you can validate the calibration. So I had the video all finished and decided I needed to add this one section. First, I wanted to mention profile type. Typically with a display where the display is managing the calibration internally, such as a high-end NEC, and I'm assuming the BenQ, because of the way that I read it's being designed, a matrix profile works just fine. There might be cases where you want to use a 16-bit profile. That's technically the most accurate. I just made a test profile using the 709. But the one thing I thought I would mention is the validate calibration. I wasn't quite sure what that did, so I decided I needed to do some research. And in fact, I had a problem with my sRGB profile. I thought when I looked at my screen, the colors looked weird. So I went back and I ran the validate calibration, and it actually failed. So I recommend that each time you make a profile, you go ahead and do the validate calibration. Now, we'll do that real quick, and what it's going to do is going to prompt you to put the device back on it. You can do this later. You can do it at any time. It will basically validate whatever the current loaded profile is. In this case, I'm going to move this underneath my display. I've already got it on there, and hit continue. Now, what this is going to do is decide if the colors it's reading as it validates fall within a particular delta E. If you look over here, you can see that the green was well outside of tolerance. The red was well outside of tolerance. When this happens, when it fails, that means you actually need to make the profile again. Easiest way to do that is to just quit the software, relaunch, and repeat the process. Now, when I remade that reference 709 profile. Again, this is the validation results. And as you can see, this is extremely good. This is the largest one is only 1.64. Almost all of them are below 1. I personally feel that your target should be to get all these numbers below 2, a delta E of 2. And it might take several attempts to do it. They definitely should all be under 4. I think if any number is over 4, it'll fail the test anyway. Once you do that, you just click on Finish. That profile is now the one that's loaded, and that's what you're seeing now that you've made that profile. Now what I want to do is basically I want to do the same thing. So we're going to open it again. And now I'm going to create my other profile. Okay, everything's still the same. We're still going to go advanced. And this time, the one thing I didn't show is that you can actually save this as a this preset. So if I change my settings, notice this, if I change my settings to 6000 and my primaries to panel native, then you can go save settings and give it a name. And so in the future, you can see here I have my 5500 as a preset, my full gamut as a preset, and this is actually the one that I use, right? Once you figure out what your settings are, I would recommend you save those as a preset. This time we're going to go ahead and do this web design one, because even though it's not web, it's not video editing in the sense of broadcast video editing. It's video editing in the sense of putting it on YouTube. Well, that's basically web. So we're going to go web design, and that default's pretty good, except I think that the brightness is too low, because usually people have monitors brighter than what I will use as a photographer. Now, if you found that going to 120L made it seem too dark, I would recommend that you give it a try, because it's amazing. It looks so dark when you first did it. I remember when I did this 10 years ago or whenever it was, and I said, man, I can't stand this. And now I can't stand anything but this. So you really do get used to it, and it really helps you judge density variations of your pictures when you're working on your files, and gives you a much better ability to get a good print. So but for web or for video for YouTube, I'm actually going to go to 160, right? And then I'll go next, and I'll go through the entire same process. Now I've already made this profile, and I've saved it in calibration 2. So we don't need to watch it go through the process. So in my case, I'm using 2 profiles. You can see this is calibration 2 now when I switched it. So I've got 2 profiles. One is for printing and when I work with, and the other's for when I'm working and judging my videos and stuff that are going to go out on the internet. Okay, so the final thing I want to show real quick is how to set up your little hotkey puck now that you've done those 2 custom profiles, so that you can use the puck to switch between them. It's not very hard. I think there's actually a couple ways to do it, but the easiest way I found is to just grab the puck itself, the button here, that takes us to this menu on the screen. And we're going to use the arrow key to go over to this one here that's the system menu. Unfortunately, I have to shoot this with a camera because this won't record. Hit OK. Now we're going to go the down arrow until we get to system. Then we're going to go to the right arrow, and we're going to go down to controller key 1. So controller key 1 represents this button here. We're going to go over, and we're going to say when you use controller key 1, we want to use calibration 1 for the setting. Go back over, go to controller key 2, and then now because it comes as the default is Adobe RGB. This default is sRGB, but we wanted to use our version of sRGB, which is a little brighter than theirs. And so we're going to go, when I push 2, I want you to use my calibration 2. Now the one thing I did find out, you'll see the controller 3 key is set to be black and white. And you can change that to anything you want. So now, when I push 1, I get my custom profile for printing. And when I push 2, I get my sRGB profile. You can see how the colors are a little cooler. And when I push 3, I would get that other profile. And so that really does it on setting it all up. As I said, I've used it. I've got it. So when I look at my print in my booth over here and I look it on the screen, it looks really good. I think I'm getting just as good a results out of this display as I did my NEC display. I'm really quite happy with it. BenQ has announced about a year ago that they're going to make a 32-inch version of this one. The 271 is a kind of an upgraded version over the old 27-inch 4K, and they discontinued the other 32-inch 4K. It's going to be a little pricey. It's going to be $1,900, almost $2,000, but it's a 4K display, which is that's a pretty good price for that big of a 4K display. And I really want that big a display because then I can use a little bit better resolution. It's a little bigger, and I have a little more screen real estate. I'm finding the 27-inch one for my video work is a little crowded. Now for Lightroom and Photoshop, it's not. It's great. I think it's plenty big enough. Well, okay, I think I'm going to wrap this video now. I was going to talk about the Adobe RGB thing, but I think I'm just going to do a separate video on that and explain why people that have BenQ monitors that want the maximum out of that monitor should be using native gamut instead of Adobe RGB. It'll be 4 or 5 minutes long, and I will actually be able to map some profiles, and I can show how colors that the monitor can show or fall outside of Adobe RGB space. So if you don't use the native space, then you'll lose those colors. And I'll show how those are actually capable of printing on some photo papers. So this video has been long enough. I think it's an awesome display. I've got a link down below where if you want to maybe grab one of them, you might be like me. Maybe you want to hold out till the 32-inch one comes out. As soon as that comes out, I'll be buying one and I'll be able to get a review on that. And I'll probably try to do that review a little quicker than these because I think everything about this video will apply. I think the software will be the same. So anyway, appreciate you guys checking out the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel down there and hit that like button if you liked it. And until next time, hey, I'll see you.